Welcome to On Again, Off Again. We're on again.
This is a show where we overanalyze relationships from TV shows. We might do movies eventually, but we're mostly starting with sitcoms. Hence the title, because they always have these on-again, off-again relationships. And so, given what we know about relationships, we try to delve in and see what made the relationship work, what made it fail. Could they have worked it out, or were they doomed from the start? Who are we analyzing today?
I think we wanted to stick with The Office.
And Dwight and Angela's relationship, of course, being a big part of all that.
It's ambiguous where Dwight and Angela actually do get together. Any one of the show creators will tell you it's a lovely little accident that Dwight is singing Little Drummer Boy in the opening scene where we see him in the first season in the pilot.
And that being, of course, Angela's favorite song ever.
Right, yes. So the significance of that was not planned. So, and Angela Kinsey even said that they found out about Dwight and Angela at the table read. That was not something that was discussed for a really long time, or that anybody I was about to say that anybody on the show, other than the writers, would have really even talked about. But the writers and the actors were so intertwined on that show for no one to know. I mean, that storyline could have come up the week of, just as like this throwaway gag of like, wouldn't it be funny?
Yeah, but I think in terms of the writing, probably subconsciously on the part of the writers, but nonetheless, we do have an interesting bit about how those two probably got together. I mean, wouldn't it make total sense if one day he's humming Drummer Boy and she starts humming along, and that's their first little moment, you know?
Exactly, and that's, it kind of makes for a fun side lore where you can pull out those things, because that's just where film theories and everything get to be fun. The first time we really see it in the show is early on, I think in season 2. Definitely, like, it's confirmed for us by the time they have the barbecue at Jim's house. And email surveillance is like episode 6 or 7. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. It's really early on where Pam starts to suspect that it's them. And then when it is confirmed for her, but then she kind of gets called out by Phyllis, thinking that the office affair she's referring to is she and Jim. That moment kind of shuts her down, and she's like, you know what? It's nobody's business. And doesn't want to go there. So,
and we can unpack that in another
That's
episode.
a whole different thing. Yeah, it's a different day.
Yeah. Oh, we could probably do a whole series just on Jim and Pam. But
I know, right?
Every episode. Yeah. But yeah, with Dwight and Angela, I mean, we also do get some definites in terms of what they found attractive in each other. Several times there's comments about her being uptight and Dwight saying it or repeating it or saying yeah to it, like he's turned on by that. I would say she probably a little bit reminds him of not just his mother, but of the other women from his culture, his weird little Pennsylvania Dutch pagan family. Yeah, and again, I say pagan because, in one episode he said that Angela introduced him to monotheism. So, yeah, there's something kind of odd with the religion of this family that we never really get the full scope of.
Well, and, in a weird way, you really can see their attraction to one another. You can see that they would be on the same page in a lot of life decisions, and that they obviously have the same motivations. However warped and really weird their relationship is, frankly. And I don't know. I mean, you can see... The sad thing is, and maybe I'm jumping a bit here, but you can see when it gets into their breakup and later on with Angela and everything, just really how deep her personal delusions are. I feel like that may not even be as solidified as it is until she and Dwight break up. Because she lets anger over the killing of Sprinkles.
Which, to be fair, in 99% of relationships at least, when someone kills your cat, it's probably the death of the relationship. But
yeah, Dwight stuck the relationship in that freezer. Like,
yeah, but you also see kind of where he's coming from, because he's a farmer, and when an animal is dying and suffering, you put it out of its misery, and that's the justification he uses. But that comes down to him being from a very different culture, a very different world, really, and that is kind of the problem. They weren't doomed from the start, but they were definitely destined to have major problems from the very beginning, just because he's from space. I mean, not literally, but he may as well be from space with how weird his culture is. And Angela's pretty strange too, but her culture is something we might encounter day to day. The super uptight and self-righteous conservative people who are also kind of delusional. I mean, we meet people like that in real life.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because if we really were to go into then, like, to look at it as that being the detrimental incident of their relationship, how, as a relationship, should Dwight have handled that? And two, I mean, like, you can talk retrospect all day long, but how do you come back from something like that is really probably a fair thing to discuss. Because, for one, Dwight was not thinking about that cat, and he certainly wasn't thinking about Angela. I think he made a very selfish move when Angela had asked him to go and take care of the cat. He thought, why would I do any of this? Even if he had never gone to take care of that cat, just left her home, never given her insulin shot or fed her medication or put the cream under her tail or whatever was on the list of all these things that Angela needed her to do. Even if he had just left that cat at home and really made a selfish decision not to do anything, that's the thing. He may not have known it was a selfish decision, but it was. And he clouded it with this justification where it was like, no, you did not do the cat a favor. She woke up in the freezer, threw up the antihistamines you gave her, and clawed the french fries to shreds until she suffocated in the freezer. That's horrific and awful. And you certainly didn't do Angela a favor, who gladly would have let that cat live out however much longer it had, putting in the care and the work that she wanted to sustain its life. The decisions made are not necessarily, you don't have to understand the decisions someone makes. You don't have to agree with them, and you don't even have to comply with them. If Dwight was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Maybe that's not a cool boyfriend move, but certainly way cooler than just killing the cat.
Well, I think in a way that comes down to Dwight was trying to take control of the situation. And he saw that his girlfriend was having this problem taking care of this cat that was clearly not well. And he, instead of just saying, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with it, he's trying to take charge of the situation. And I would say that that's pretty typical of Dwight.
Right.
He's always trying to take control of every situation. But at the same time, that's probably also, ironically, one of the big things that Angela is so attracted to about him. The fact that he takes charge. He just took it too far. And that's something that I think, I can't necessarily speak for women, but definitely for men, we have to keep in mind is that the very things that attract our partners to us may very well become something that can repel them too. I mean, someone's attracted to you for your sense of humor. You can't just be telling jokes and being goofy literally all the time.
Sure.
Someone likes you because you're very serious and you take things seriously. Well, you have to laugh once in a while. Someone likes you because you're romantic. Sometimes you have to be a little more practical. Any number of different things. to strike that right balance. And that was Dwight's problem. So then coming back from that, well, that certainly needs time, first of all, which
Right.
they have, but it ends up muddled by any number of different things. I don't know. How else would you come back from doing something that extreme? I mean, it's a sitcom, so all the behavior of everybody is extreme
Well, sure.
and insane. You know, these are not models to live by any means. But I don't know. I guess considering the fact that people can come back from these absurdities in this world, clearly, otherwise they all would have killed each other years ago, with the crazy things they do. So how would someone go about it?
Right. Well, and that's the funny thing about this. I mean, no part of this podcast can actually operate under the presumption that this is the way that normal people would act. Especially when it comes to Dwight and Angela. Their whole shtick is they are not normal people. But I think that probably where when it comes to striking the balance between the things that are your attractive traits that could also be your unattractive traits, if you know that you don't balance something well, part of the benefit of a relationship is to work to the point where someone might actually enjoy what they do in you because it's not in them. Angela, I think, likes Dwight to take charge because she would rather that she didn't have to. She will, and she always does, because she has this kind of complex that, if she doesn't do it, it won't get done right. And that's a personal problem to work on. That's just pride. But at the same time, I think that Dwight might be one of the few people that when taking charge actually does it in a way that is satisfying to her. And that would be very attractive. When the rest of the world is a bunch of incompetent fools, the man that loves you is not. That's amazing. And unfortunately, probably, to put it in those terms, Dwight acted like an idiot and did not take charge in the way that Angela, like, he really betrayed a lot of levels of trust for her. And I don't know, when you're striking that balance, I think the important thing is to be able to see the opposite in the person that you're with and be able to actually work out with them whether how you actually balance those things, and whether that's something that your partner needs to bring up more in themselves or vice versa. And so the communication aspect is and always will be what it needs to come down to. And even when bouncing back from it, like, you can watch in the episodes when Dwight is trying to fix it, when he's saying, this doesn't have to be the end. You can even kind of see Angela working for that. But what ends up happening is that Dwight, one, tries to just replace the cat. I don't want garbage, I want sprinkles. And the funny thing about that is later on with Andy, he does get her a cat and she's very flattered by it. But the context of giving her a pet cat are vastly different between these two men. One is trying to throw a Band-Aid on the situation. The other one's trying to impress her. And for Dwight, in many ways, there may not be a way to come back from that because basically he killed her child.
Yeah.
But obviously they do. She's willing to forgive him eventually and let pride and anger and things subside. But that all the better then to realize that their relationship might be more important than that. I mean, let's face it, this may be kind of a dark turn to take for the moment, and we'll spring right back from it. But there are families who come back from their own child getting run over in their driveway accidentally by one of the parents through negligence or what, it happens. These are the things that people do bounce back from. So to say that it can't be done really isn't fair.
Well, I would say that one thing that you were saying right now kind of made me think the way that Angela ultimately gets through her problems with Dwight killing her cat, if you think about it, comes down to she goes through a heck of a lot and makes a lot of very terrible mistakes herself, to the point where she pretty knowingly marries a gay man who just happens to also be a state senator, and she acts like this is a huge deal. Tries to have Oscar's kneecaps broken or worse.
Yeah, that's messed up.
For sleeping with her husband, which, I mean, I get it, but geez, especially someone you've worked next to and been friends with for so long. And then she helps them cover up the affair after that. She does so many terrible things, makes so many terrible decisions over the course of the whole show that I think she comes to a place where she judges Dwight less harshly because she realizes the kinds of terrible decisions she could make. So if you're in a position where you're trying to forgive someone for something that they did accidentally, but you're just having such a hard time because it was just such a terrible tragedy, I would say take any time you made a bad decision and there were bad consequences and try to imagine what those consequences really could have been if they were the worst possible version of your consequences that were available for those actions. I mean, you ever drive tired? Almost everyone I know that has driven when they might have been just a little too tired once before. And they all made it home safely and nothing terrible happened. I don't know personally of anyone who fell asleep at the wheel and something bad happened, but people do fall asleep at the wheel. And so, yeah, if you're someone who's trying to forgive someone for something terrible, I mean, that they did on accident, and stop and think about things like that.
Well, and it's interesting. We're going to hit on it over and over again in this podcast, but when it comes down to it, the on again, off again, whether it's a really big deal or something really stupid, is eventually going to come down to how do you actually bounce back? How do you bounce back from conflict? We do not have a relationship, dating culture, whatever, that values sticking it out. At least not in a healthy way. The irony of it is most people that you see staying together for a long period of time after doing this on again, off again thing probably should have stayed off for the first time. But for those that do encounter real issues and want to make it work, there is a hope for that. And all the better that we take the time to call out the people who have really light, mundane nothingness happen and can't handle it. If I can go there quickly, maybe we shouldn't change subject just yet, but Aaron. When Aaron breaks up with Andy by finding out that he was engaged to Angela and didn't tell her, did not deserve a cake in his face and the end of their relationship. It required a conversation and cool, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. It's that simple. Oh, you didn't tell me? Yeah, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Oh, I apologize. Good, please don't do it again. Done. It's not that hard. Yeah. And so when you take something like Andy and Angela, who are clearly good for each other, and
Andy and Angela?
I'm sorry, Dwight and Angela. Yes. Yeah, no, okay. I know. Well, and it's like that line from Pam when she's like, I couldn't do that to Andy or Angela. Or I couldn't do that to Dwight or Andy or Angela when she can't set them up with each other. Like it's, these people are not good for anybody, but when you pair them up together, it's like, okay, yeah, I guess that's all right. Because Dwight and Angela are not good people. And that's pretty apparent throughout the majority of the series. It's not, they don't have redeeming qualities until the very, very end of the show.
Yeah.
And I mean, okay, fine. Sometimes it takes 10 years for people to learn how to be decent human beings. But it's kind of like this match made in somewhere I don't want to visit. But for them to be in a position where they are very much made for each other and to run into something that is a huge betrayal of trust, a founded in principles that are not going to change. That's the thing. Dwight is not going to stop Mercy killing animals. You know, Angela is not going to stop seeing her animals as her children. And that is a dynamic where they're going to have to learn how to balance that with each other. I don't know if they ever do.
But isn't she going to stop seeing the animals as her children a little bit because by the end they have a child?
That's true, but there's a very there's a disturbing line where Angela's like, when her cats get taken away, that she says she doesn't have anything, and Oscar's like, Angela, you have your son. She's like, yeah, whatever. I understand she loves her cats. It's a huge violation to have someone come in and take them away from you, but yeah, you still have your son. And she's like, yeah, whatever.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. She'll probably still see the animals as her kids. More than her actual kid, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe not eventually.
Hopefully
I don't know. Maybe
not.
with some changes. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think in being able to come back from something like that does take the time that they need. But here's the really unhealthy part about this is that they have been so secretive for so long that they don't have the ability, like when Angela and even Dwight start using Jim and Pam as kind of these secretive ability to go and actually have a confidant. Like Angela does confide in Pam, and they receive some advice and an ability to did Jim ever kill one of your cats? I'm more of a dog person. It's like
that was a pretty good Pam Beasley too.
yeah, exactly. Well, and so if they had been an open combined life, people 2 years down the road in an actual cohabitating comfortable relationship with each other, could have dealt with this as open cohabitating people who were, rather than just shutting it down and acting as if nothing ever happened and never needed to. And that's the thing, is even their breakup was one of those that wanted to just sweep even the hurt under the rug, like, and that's just not healthy for anyone.
Hence Dwight crying in the hallway in one scene, and when Jim comes to be his comfort.
That is the greatest scene ever. Yeah. Or like the sweetest Michael Scott line, Sprinkles?
Oh.
He knows the name of her cat. It's adorable.
Yeah. So we get into Andy asking Angela out. I don't know. What do you think was at the source of that attraction there? I mean, he shot for Pam first, but that turned out, hilarious.
Angela Kinsey is not an unattractive woman.
Okay.
And
fair.
in Andy's mind, that may be all that matters. He's willing to go after Kelly or Pam or, like he implies with several women back at the other office that he's had office affairs with them, though they're probably not true. And so he doesn't seem to care. And yet I think that when I don't know, Andy is such an interesting character because I think he so deeply wants to be perceived one way or another. He is a yes man,
Yeah.
that he will fall into that role 100%. And in that moment when courting Angela, his role was to be the doting boyfriend, fiance, that was his game to play at that moment, and he played it really well. And it was like, oh, well, this is actually kind of nice because look at him trying so hard with this horrible woman.
Yeah.
But you see that change in just about every situation that he's in, that depending on what is expected from him or what he wishes people saw in him, he's gonna change regardless of who he's dealing with.
Yeah. I would also say, they both have the wasp thing going on. Probably doesn't hurt.
Well, yeah, exactly. I know. There's
Yeah.
yeah.
They come from a similar culture.
Yeah, I come from a line of wasps so old that it dates back to Moses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, they come from a similar background, a similar culture, and that being one of the problems with her and Dwight being that he came from such a different culture with such a different way of thinking. I mean, it's kind of a chance at having something that's a little more simpatico, It's and then also we can't discount the fact that in Angela's case, a lot of this is clearly for the sake of hurting Dwight. But I wouldn't say that she's completely without any feelings for Andy at all.
Right. Well, and it is very interesting. I mean, basically the question that we ask ourselves in the beginning of any of these podcasts is going to have to be like, could they have made it, kind of thing. I don't know if Angela weren't horrible, like maybe, because Andy was willing to do what he needed to do to make that relationship work, which, I mean, work with them is a relative term, and it's actually kind of sad. Poor guy should have bailed on that madness a long time ago.
He was giving up on pretty much everything he ever wanted for her, but finally his deal breaker was that she... I mean, or the first deal breaker he states, anyway,
yeah,
is that she won't allow his old a cappella group to perform at their wedding. It's the first ultimatum he gives her after he's sacrificed everything.
So
I mean, he may as well be selling his own organs at this point. It's ridiculous. And what actually then kills the relationship is the discovery that she was sleeping with Dwight. And it's especially interesting for someone as uptight and angry about things being whorish to where green is a little whorish,
yes.
She says, which the Office ladies had a great episode about. I mean, seriously, check that out. That was hilarious.
Amazing.
But for someone who has those opinions and accuses Pam of dressing like a hussy, to then turn around and while she's still engaged to Andy, have this ongoing affair with Dwight, while Dwight in the meantime is taking whatever he can get. And it's clear though that he's not just sleeping with her because he likes sleeping with her. He's sleeping with her because he thinks it will actually get her back. Some part of the relationship she still wants to hold on to, so he wants to remind her of how much she enjoyed that part of the relationship. And she certainly remembers, to the point where she's talking about having their wedding on Schrute Farms and giving that very specific description of the barn and the tools and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so messed up. Well, and you have to wonder if one, if she was not sleeping with Dwight, whether she would have gone through with it and they would have had this really weird dynamic marriage. If she, even if her initial being with Andy and acceptance of his proposal all were just to get back at Dwight, if they never actually got back together, might she and Andy have made it work? That may be possible in a really sad way, just because that relationship is with two deeply delusional people who are obviously not working to make one another genuinely happy and well cared for. That would just suck the life out of both of them after a little while, I think. But I don't know. As a character, I can't stand Angela. I mean, she's hilarious and I love watching the show. It doesn't like put me off watching it or anything, but to think of her as a real person is just horrific, because everything she does, even it's almost as if she and Dwight rekindle their relationship over their sadistic cat playing with a mouse kind of joy, just watching him scuttle around doing everything he can for her, and they both seem to get this weird pleasure of just watching, like, oh, look at this idiot. Yeah. And sadly, that is kind of, I think, where a lot of affairs find their strength. Is, I mean, maybe not their initial start, but if they keep going, there is something in there that, like, when it comes to justifying your own bad decisions, if you can make someone else look stupid and make yourself look good just because of how dumb they appear to be in your own eyes, for someone who has a overinflated ego and a controlling complex and, you know, all of these things like Dwight and Angela both have, and obviously are attracted to that in one another, poor Andy just got thrown over the coals in that relationship, and they both were like cackling madly and happily to watch him burn.
Truly malicious version of what Jim does to Dwight.
Interesting.
Because Jim is really just having fun with Dwight, and he's having fun at how he can trick Dwight and how Dwight's kind of stupid sometimes. But it's never truly malicious. It's almost always
right
to create a greater sense of wonder. I mean, sometimes, yeah, it's just humiliating, but it's also a greater sense of wonder either for Dwight or about Dwight. It's always creating, either by convincing him that he's got magic beans and switching out his pots with full-grown beanstalks the next, minutes later, or making him think that he's looking for the Holy Grail. Or inversely, I mean, the moments where Jim will do things like he'll move all of Dwight's desk and everything into the bathroom and then just watch as Dwight tries to find all his stuff, and when he finally does, sits down to work at his desk in the bathroom. And that's just, Jim's like, it's amazing, he actually did it, just to see what he could get him to do. It's a sense of wonder either for Dwight or about him, and that's what makes it not malicious. It's also quite not as deep as messing with someone's relationships.
Yeah.
And it's an appropriate distance as well that Jim maintains.
Well, and I find it interesting that you bring that up, because Jim makes it pretty clear that he pranks Dwight because he's annoyed by Dwight. He kind of wants to just give him back some of this annoyance. But half of the pranks that Jim pulls would not anger and annoy a normal person like they would Dwight. Like when Jim finds 50 yards of red cable at a flea market for like 20 cents and buys the whole spool and runs it all up a telephone pole and throughout the office and everything running from Dwight's computer, Stanley is not going to go running after a cord on his computer. He wouldn't notice a cord on his computer. Like no one else in the office, literally no one else would that work on. It's the same thing with the Jello. It's the like and Stanley would eat the Jello. Creed would eat the Jello. Like no one would care like Dwight cares, and Jim knows that, and he can push that button because it knocks Dwight out of his own ring.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is it's like, look, you can't put yourself in a fighting ring and then act as if I can't come in and play by my rules and still make you lose your own game. And that's what a lot of prideful and goofy and a little too sanctimonious people need, where when it comes to, well, Andy, even the one prank that we see him really get played on, well, and I should say too, because he gets the Jello, the stapler and the Jello too, and he freaks out about that. So and then he punches the wall when they prank him with his cell phone. So Andy's reactions, and of course those are earlier Andy, where he before he's gone to anger management and things like that, but his reactions to pranking are vastly different, of course, from Dwight's. And that when he is being toyed with by Angela and Dwight, it's not to take him down a peg, it's just to push him down and keep him down.
Yeah.
Like, he's not acted in a way that deserves this at all. He's not done something to Angela or done something to Dwight that would allow there to be some sort of justification for what they end up doing to him.
Yeah. And I think when Andy finally has his, quote, fight with Dwight and goes to run him over with the car, I think that's more than just Andy being resourceful, knowing that he can't take Dwight in a fight. I think that's the level of anger he feels at being toyed with for so long, having this going on. He's like, I'll run him over with the car. But you notice Andy doesn't go full speed with it.
I don't think he has the guts for that.
Yeah, he's not trying to kill Dwight, which, a lot of men in his position probably would have, especially given that kind of opportunity. But he doesn't, which I guess, good on him. But I do think that, yes, Angela and Andy were doomed from the start. I feel that he was at a point in his life, at least, where he was never going to take charge in any kind of relationship, that any kind of woman who sought to walk all over him would walk all over him. And I think that just given the kind of people that Andy and Angela are, I don't think they had a chance, ultimately. I think she was always going to go back to Dwight as well, because he was the only one with the traits that really were as messed up as hers. And we brought up Jim and his pranks on Dwight and how they knocked Dwight down a peg. But if you're paying attention, it really feels like by the end of the show, Jim's relationship with Dwight, both in terms of the pranks and in terms of the actual kind of friendship that forms through the mutual friend of Pam, that's really what brings Dwight around to who he needs to be at the end. And similarly, I think for Angela, a big part of it was that she needed to get closer with Oscar. And then he ends up helping her be a little more reasonable. And it's ultimately the kind of people they become by hanging around with good friends who are good examples. And that's something we all need, is good friends who are good examples for us.
I think it's interesting that you bring up Oscar with Angela and Jim with Dwight, because they're the ones that they each open up to when they do finally confront how they feel about one another. Because I mean, Angela has just been running from Dwight this whole time. Philip's his son.
Yeah.
And she tells him over and over again to his face that that's not the case. One thing I've never fully understood is that Dwight like gets the diaper to do a DNA sample and it comes back negative. But and Angela's like, "See?" And I don't know if that's just supposed to be that it was an inconclusive test or what that was about. I feel like the show did not explain it very
Her
clearly.
husband is a state senator. He's trying to cover things up.
I don't know if it was
State
that
senators
deep,
have
but...
a lot of power.
Yeah, seriously, that yeah. Well, he did get the credit card machine stuck on the parking meters, you know. So this guy's got a lot of power in the community. I'm giving away a little bit how well I know this show. So when it comes down to it, I think that Andy and Angela have the staying power that they need after having learned what they've learned. I mean, Angela has one of the greatest lines of the series. She eventually goes to Andy and says, "Look, don't let pride ruin your whole life. It's not worth it." Yeah. And she's spent like 5 years figuring that out. To the point where it was almost too late. Like 4 times. You know, she did like there's a lot to be said for once you know what you need to know, you can make a lot of things work. But if you reject those lessons when you could have learned them 6 years ago, yeah, honey, maybe you should have learned a long time ago not to let pride ruin your whole life. Hey, how much better off would you be? But you know, that's just where we want to see growth in characters, and that's fine. But as far as real life relationships go, I mean, nobody should expect that they're going to get as many chances as Angela got to put away their pride and end up with the person they're supposed to be with. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so for them to come out where they did, I think is beautiful, and it's just a good way to tell the show. And next to Jim and Pam, they're the best relationship on there. I mean, it's
well, Michael and Holly maybe, but we don't get as much with them, really.
Yeah, if only we did. That would have been lovely. Yeah, but and that's true. They're definitely up there. Well, and so, you know, it's probably fair just to wrap up this one, since we've kind of honed in on Dwight and Angela. I keep wanting to say Andy, and we'll address Andy and how he kind of branches into this probably in the next episode. But when I think that the greatest thing that they each could have learned, that's the saddest part about this, is they could have learned what they eventually learned a lot sooner. And that's the kind of thing that any relationship is. It's like, okay, 10 years from now, if I had the chance, if all I need is time to let this thing heal and subside and just make sure that I just don't feel as angry about it anymore. If you were given 10 years, do you think you could make it work? And everything that happens in between, and everything that could or could not go down, or, you know, however it is that you feel you might be able to handle it. Well, do you think you can give that to yourself right now? Can you forgive it and act as if you were moving on, as if you had 10 years to put behind you? Can you put this thing behind you and actually make decisions, not as if it didn't happen, but as if it did, and that's going to mean something going forward? Because the sad thing is, unfortunately, Dwight and Angela had the opportunity to address this as if that was something that they could learn about each other and from each other and do something different, when this situation will inevitably come up again. You just know it will. I mean, Angela's always going to have cats that she loves, and they're going to have diseases, and she's going to take care of them, and she's not going to have them euthanized. She thinks they don't go to cat heaven if they do. Like that's something that is extremely important to her. So if they had dealt with this at the time, all it would take is, no, Dwight, you can't euthanize the cats.
Yes, let that be an example to all you men. Always call your significant other and ask them, is it okay if I kill your cat? Before, no, the point is really before you make any kind of big decision that's going to affect them, really. And if you're really close, then pretty much any big decision should be at least run by them before you just do it. And killing someone's cat is a pretty big decision. Yeah. I mean, even if we assumed that they were farmers and he's like, well, one of your cows isn't looking so good, you at least ask the farmer first, is it okay if I put down your cow? So, it's that basic communication. Is it okay before you go making changes?
And that's a lesson in pride that Dwight has to learn too. So, it's just, it's interesting to see each of them come down to this point, especially where, I don't know, Dwight has laid down his pride long before he actually makes a move for Angela. Of course, their saving grace is him pursuing her regardless of Philip being his son, because if you back it up to him kind of learning about that, like, he really didn't have any long-term intentions. Like, yeah, they were sleeping together, but obviously that didn't mean much to either of them for a very long time. So he didn't, and she was married, like this pursuit of her. I can understand her move to want to ensure that he really cared about her, and and that decision. But for each of them to be willing to make decisions with each other and for one another, that's the crux of them actually being able to make it work. Because without that, they're just two people hooking up randomly and acting as if they're in a relationship. That never works. Ever.
Yeah. One thing their son also gives them is a definite common goal. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that's also very important for couples, is to have common goals that they're working toward. Sometimes the goals are left a bit ambiguous, but it is good to talk about the goals. And in some cases, they're understood. I mean, they both step in to raise Philip together. And that common goal is a big part of what'll unite them, and what does unite them.
Absolutely.
Common goals are sometimes even bonded Dwight and Jim a bit.
Yeah, seriously.
Like, Dwight's all about a common goal.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, and yeah, you get passionate and you get motivated and you work and all those things you kind of need to actually have any relationship, not just a romantic one, but a business partnership or a friendship or anything like that. You have to be intentional and care about the actions you're taking. So, yeah, Dwight and Angela could have worked way earlier had they not both been a little bit of awful people. But there is hope for all of us to be a little less of awful people. And, when two mildly horrible people find each other, maybe they can have a not completely awful relationship. How's that for a closing statement?
Or, with the help of good friends, good examples, they can improve themselves so that the relationship they end up in isn't just them torturing each other. Incidentally, we might analyze The Good Place next.
There you go. That's right. Wait, how do you make the good place for each other?
Yeah.
So, Awesome. Well, it's been fun. And so we may have a part 2 with Andy eventually, but not necessarily next episode. We'll just have to see where this goes and who we want to talk about. So it's been fun, and on again, off again.
And we're off again.